Hey guys, thanks for clicking on this video. You have landed on the channel Mr. Articulate, where I post a YouTube video of between 5 and 10 minutes each night, and whatever topic I'm talking about, my goal as I speak my way through the video is to have an orchestration of my words and my thoughts so that they have a coherent purpose behind them, a coherent beginning, middle, and end, so that I'm not just saying a series of statements in whatever random order they pop into my mind. And I do not practice ahead of time, or very little anyway, about what I'm going to say, because in the end, long term, I hope that I will be able to get thoughts organized quickly, and whenever anyone asks me to speak about something, be able to speak in a coherent, communicative way about it. So today's video, I am going to talk about an essay that I just read from the famous French novelist Michele Houellebecq. This was an essay of his that was published in Harper's Magazine in 2019. He, of course, being a French writer, wrote the essay in French, and it was translated for publication in Harper's. And in this essay, Houellebecq praises Donald Trump and says that he is a good president. This is 2019, so we are most of the way through President Trump's first term. And obviously, Harper's Magazine being a part of the mainstream media, most of the people who subscribe to Harper's or find their way to the Harper's website would decidedly not have agreed with the statement that Donald Trump was a good president. It would almost seem like a ludicrous thing for someone to say. To publish an essay on with that being the premise, Donald Trump is a good president, would be like publishing an essay, tigers make good pets, or something to that effect. But he makes the case, and broadly speaking, Houellebecq's perspective, which is clear in the essay, is he believes in nationalism, not internationalism. So really, if Houellebecq is in his mid-40s or maybe his early 50s, he's lived his whole life in an internationalist order where his nation of France, other nations in Europe, the United States as well, and so on, all aspire to a world order that is highly integrated, so that there are still nations, but that there are supranational institutions that also govern the lives of people who live in individual nations. And Houellebecq believes that internationalism is a mistake. In the essay, he really talks about two forms of internationalism that he believes have been deleterious for really all people in the world. And those are military interventions and free trade. And if you think about those two things, those are things that President Trump in both his first administration and now in his second have been very opposed to. President Trump doesn't want to see the United States intervening in parts of the world militarily, and he doesn't want us to be on the free trade train that Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, and Biden have all been cheerleaders for. So when you understand that Houellebecq looks at the military adventurism that the West has engaged in the last few decades as a bad thing, and more controversially to a typical Harper's reader, he believes that free trade, as we have pursued it in the past 30, 40 years, has been a bad thing. You can understand why he will look at this same man, whom so many American Harper's readers would consider a dreadful president, and shrug his shoulders and say, I don't know. Seems to me like he's doing pretty well. He points out in the essay that every president that we have had from George H.W. Bush onward before Trump did get us engaged in at least one military conflict overseas. He does single out President Obama for pushing the brakes and preventing a U.S. intervention in Syria during the civil war that broke out there while President Obama was in the White House. And that by itself was a small step in the right direction, and Houellebecq does praise him for that. But nevertheless, President Obama did go and bomb Libya. And President Trump went his whole first term without ever doing that. And he also talks about the fact that every U.S. president on trade has been an unabashed internationalist from Clinton onward, at least. And the fact that President Trump has looked at various trade treaties and taken them on a case-by-case basis and said, this trade treaty is good for the United States or it's not. And in the latter cases, he has sought to rip up those treaties and start again, is again something that in President Trump's first term and very much in his second term now, he is absolutely reviled for in the legacy media. You can also call it the mainstream media, and by the people who consume legacy media and consider it to be a correct record of what's going on in the world and in our country. But Houellebecq looks at these same things, and far from reviling President Trump, he says, God bless him for it, and would only that his own country, France, take President Trump's lead and do the same. So I like to, in these videos that I do where I have read something and then I make a video about it, I like to go with a little three-part formula where I summarize in a one sentence or maybe two sentences a major idea from the video and then give an example to support that main idea and then apply it to something in the world that's going on or something that I already knew before that reading. So to finish out the video that way, I will call the main idea of Houellebecq's essay, internationalism is, to use a phrase that he used in the essay, a bad dream that we have to wake up from. And President Trump, far from being a bad president for drawing the U.S. away from internationalism back toward nationalism, is actually doing his country a favor and the world a favor. An example of that, I mean, there would be so many examples of President Trump doing that. So do I want to make an example from something President Trump's done, or do I want to make the example be an argument of Houellebecq's? I think I'll do the second thing. So, Michele Houellebecq, what is an argument, or what's an example he uses in the essay to argue for internationalism being a unfavorable thing? Sometimes I need to really pause in these videos to gather my thoughts, but I have found that just taking the time to do that live on camera has actually been really helpful for me getting faster with these things. So you'll have to bear with me while I do it here. It's funny, I know he does. He, for the most part, just lets it be a given that his opinion is anti-internationalist, but I'm sure he gave at least some intellectual justifications for that viewpoint, even though that wasn't the main purpose of the essay, he more gives examples. He gives examples of internationalism from both the EU and the US, but I'm trying to remember an example of him saying why such and such is bad. For instance, the president of France during the Syrian civil war was Francois Hollande, and Hollande wanted to go into Syria, and Obama resisted that. And so that would be an example of internationalism. But what I want to do here is remember an intellectual argument for why a military intervention or a free trade agreement is a bad thing. All right, I will give this. He basically says that the European Union is doomed to fail because if you think about the etymology of the term democracy, it's democracy. It's rule by the people. And Houellebecq says that can't just be people. It has to be a people who have some sort of identity in common. And internationalism is a fool's game and a dead end because you can't just make all the people in Europe feel like they are a people called Europeans. A people have to have some sort of united sense of history, belonging, traditions, tastes, and so on. Oh my gosh, my cat. All this while I have a sleeping toddler on the same floor with me, so I hope my cat doesn't wake my toddler. So that is an example of why internationalism is something that President Trump should be opposed for peeling us back from, is that democratic culture requires demos, a people. And a people, that's a national thing. It's not ever going to be an international thing. And then finally, to apply it to something I already know, now that we're in President Trump's second term, examples are rife, but the 10% tariff that President Trump has implemented and that I very much support is applying Houellebecq's ideas from this 2019 essay to something that's going on in the world right now. I bet you Mr. Houellebecq, sitting wherever it is that he lives in France, following the news in the US, which he says he does to some extent, is giving 2 thumbs up to President Trump's 10% tariff and hoping, just hoping, that the leaders of his own country will do the same for his demos. All right, so that's it. That's the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching to the end if you did, and I will be back soon with another video.